When it talks about that in Matthew 24, it's like only the Father knows the day or the hour. Some people struggle with that because they're like, why did Jesus not know? Why did he subordinate himself to the Father and say, well, why can't Jesus know this information in the Father? But it's all nested in bridal language. It's all nested as a groom. And he purposely does not know because he wants to live in relationship with the Father as the Son, and they want it to be a wedding.
Can we actually predict the end?
And see, you weren't here during our last discussion when we're listening to all these guys that are like pulling the trigger on, this is the end, this is the end. And they were just dead wrong. And of course, there was one of my favorites was Harold Camping. Remember Harold Camping?
I have no idea who you're talking about.
You don't know Harold Camping?
Enlighten me, John.
We didn't either, don't worry.
Oh, you serious? You've never heard of him?
No, you were informing us last
You would
episode.
love this guy. The people would call in all the time and he'd be like, thank you for your question. And he would just like answer and he would give all these answers. And I listened to him for years and I thought he was awesome. And then in 1994, he's like, this is the end. We know it's going to happen. It's going to happen in September. I was interning at a church, this guy, Eugene Miller, over at Living Hope up in Dublin, PA. He circled his calendar in September. He's like, rapture season, because we were just joking, like, whatever. But that's when he said it would happen. And it didn't happen. And then he said, well, maybe I got the dates wrong. And he readjusted it, I think, to 2011. And then readjusted it again to 2012. 3 times the guy was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I feel like with this, historically, whether it's us as Christians or just people of faith, don't have a good track record. I think we kind of treat it almost like that one person, everyone's like, hey, don't date them.
Mm-hmm.
And your family's like, don't date them. Like, they're bad news. And your friend's like, don't date them. And you're like,
Right.
well, I'm different. Like, I can change it, right? Like, I can figure out the end. I think we do that sometimes
He's a
with this.
wounded bird.
Yeah,
I
we're
can
like-
fix him.
We like Nicolas Cage, like National Treasure our way through. Like, well, maybe I can
Dude.
Rubik's Cube my way through this thing and figure it
Nice
out.
reference. That's
I
one
knew
of
that
my
one.
favorite movies.
I got you, bro.
Because you know what? Listen, that should be a theme of this particular program because he figures it out with all these clues and stuff like that. That's exactly what people get all amped up about when they read Revelation. They're like, oh, okay. It must be the next clue.
Right.
I'm trying to do my best Nicolas
Nicolas Cage impression.
Yeah.
But we make that mistake, I feel like.
Yeah.
And I mean, scripture's pretty clear. I
Yeah.
mean, we see this in Matthew, we see this in Mark, that Jesus is like, hey, only the Father knows.
Yeah.
And
What is the reference on that?
I think
It's-
I have
Matthew 24.
Mark
Matthew 24.
13.
Yep.
So you guys know the kind of history on that? It bears, I mean, it's a good story, right? Can I
Go
tell
for
the
it.
story?
Yeah, please.
You're my timekeeper. You're cut me off.
I'm watching.
Shut up already.
Mark
So
13.
he's referencing, and then it also comes up again, I think, when he's in John 14. He's like, look, I go to prepare a place for you. And Jesus is talking about, like, there will be a fateful day when he returns for us, but he's going to prepare a place for us. All of this is like wedding language. And so in ancient Israel, the people, the parties would come together, and it was usually arranged, but the arrangement could involve people that actually liked each other and knew each other. Maybe were like good friends. But the families would come together. They would sign a ketuvah, which is like a contract, like a marriage contract. They would like exchange a couple cups of wine, and they would like the priest would bless the union so that now they were engaged. They were betrothed, but it wasn't like married. They were engaged, and then the husband or the man would go off, the fiance would go off to his house, and he would build onto his house. It was the marriage chamber, the bridal chamber, where he would actually live. And so they would build on to the father's house. And then the woman would go and she would learn how to cook, clean, and sew. And, I always say, like, that's how it ought to be. It's just the way it was. But she would learn like matronly type of things. But they would separate for about a year. And then the man would work on this chuppah, like the bridal chamber, this thing that was connected to the father's house. And it would take a while. So about almost a year into it, he would be almost finished. And he would come to his father, every day, maybe every week, whatever, and say, Father, is it almost yet? And only the father knew. So only the father would inspect everything, and he knew when the fateful day was for his son to have permission to go and find his wife. So when it talks about that in Matthew 24, it's like only the Father knows the day or the hour. Some people struggle with that because they're like, why did Jesus not know? Why did he subordinate himself to the Father and say, well, why can't Jesus know this information in the Father? But it's all nested in bridal language. It's all nested as a groom. And he purposely does not know because he wants to live in relationship with the Father as the Son, and they want it to be a wedding. And see, I think a lot of people get freaked out about the end times, and they get freaked out about Revelation, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's a horror story. It's a wedding. It's beautiful. There's something happening. The biggest party of all time is about to happen in Revelation 20 and 21. On the heels of like all these things that are where sin is going to keep decaying to such a point where everything's horrible. But when the Father finally says, yep, today's the day, then the Son goes and he gets all his groomsmen and they go through if they were rich, they rode on horses. If they weren't, they just banged pots and pans and ran through the town. And that's why the ladies were all waiting. So like the bride had the bridesmaids, and the bridesmaids roll out there with their lanterns, like their flashlights, just seeing, did he come tonight? Oh my gosh, he's coming tonight, quick. And they'd run back, quick. And she'd wake up, she'd be like, get my makeup, I gotta look beautiful. And all. So they would get her ready. And so when Jesus is saying, like, be ready, it's that image. Like, we are the bride. And we are the bridesmaids. Like, is he coming? Is he coming? Just being ready. And so we shouldn't be freaked out. We should be more expectant, excited, like it's coming. And then, of course, when he shows up, again, if he's rich, come, my lady, and, gets on the horse. Or, if it's not so well, it probably would have been more like my wedding, where it's like, put her on a chair, run her through town. And so, they go, and that's where they have this feast that lasts for 7 days. And that feast, that wedding feast, is what Jesus has in mind in John chapter 14, the whole idea of Matthew's 24, right? Yep. Where, man, there's going to be this giant feast at the end of time. And so it's like this podcast, what we should be helping people realize, not so much about dates and times, but more like expectancy. Don't get freaked out. Yeah. This isn't like barricading yourself with a shotgun. This is more like, no. We want to make sure we get this message out to other people that there's a huge wedding happening at the end of all this, that God and man, it would be like a bride and a groom, coming together.
Yeah, that's great. And so it almost seems like we're saving everyone time by saying, hey, don't look for a date. Yeah. Don't look for a moment. What we're trying to draw out of Scripture is just be ready.
Yeah, but it's too cool. It's too much fun to be like, but what are the...
What if I knew?
Pencils ready.
Yeah, but there is a flip side of that too, where it's like, I think we tend to gravitate towards one or the other, where it's like, oh, you're the Nicolas Cage, you're trying to figure it out. Or you're like, I would probably be more in this camp where it's like, oh, I've read the end and I'm good, and so I don't need to pay attention to it. And that's wrong too. It's like, there's another message he's trying to get across in an urgency, and like you said, kind of that hopeful view of looking at it. Like, how can I live with expectancy? And I can't do that if I'm just checking out and like I know how it ends.
So Matt Parks, he's one of our communicators, right? And he's the campus pastor up at West Shore. And when we were doing a series with young adults, we were producing our own material on the Book of Revelation. And so we were like, cool, let's get into this. And so I asked Matt to do one of the weeks, and he was like, nope. He wouldn't do it.
Touch it.
Yeah. And so I'm like, well, let's meet at least before you say no. And I sat down. I'm like, what do you mean you're not going to do it? Like, come on, can you help us out? Can you spare a dime? And so he was just like, I gotta be honest with you, man. It's like, it makes me anxious just even thinking about it, because like growing up, we thought Jesus is going to come back any minute. And I think he has this story of like, he would come home and he would check to see if his family was still there. Every time he came home from school, he'd be like, is everybody still there? So he's like, even now, like I talked to my counselor about this. Like I get freaked out about it. And I'm like, well, let's talk. Like, what do you get freaked out? He's like, oh my gosh, all this death, destruction. God's going to come back. He's going to judge everybody. I'm like, yeah, that's part of it. But like, he's judging the bad stuff. Like, don't we want the bad stuff judged? And so we walked through Revelation a little bit. He's like, I didn't learn that growing up. And so it was sad to me, because I mean, maybe in some ways I was insulated because I didn't grow up in the church. And maybe if I had grown up in the church, I'd be freaked out about it. But because I didn't grow up in the church, all I heard was Harold Camping tell me about rapture season, September, like it's coming. So I think that's pretty
real important. Yeah, it's real important what you're saying here, is because someone listening right now is probably in that camp of feeling just anxious about it, fearful about it.
Yeah.
And so are you saying that Scripture telling us all of this, what should we feel? I mean, you mentioned a celebration, a wedding, maybe there's no different way to say it, but like, as we're reading this, how should we feel? What should we be pulling out of this? And is it meant to be encouraging, or is it meant to be, hey, spooky a little bit, to feel the urgency? Like, is that part of it?
I think whenever you ask that question of any book or any writing from the Old New Testament, you can speak into this too, but you got to consider, like, what was the original intent? And so was the original intent of the Book of Revelation to be written to suburbanites in a coffee shop who have everything they need?
Think so.
Yeah. Who are struggling with AI. Or was it intended to be written to people that are suffering persecution
Mhm.
and injustice? And when you frame it like that, it's like, okay, so imagine we lived in a version of America where we can't practice our faith. And if we do, we get in trouble for it, or that we got to keep it on the down low and we got to worship in quiet. And people we know have been abused or maybe even killed for their faith. If you read a book that talked about how evil is going to be judged one day, what would it make you feel like?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that make you feel a little bit better?
Absolutely. Be
Yeah.
much more encouragement, hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the book is written to people of the first century that are struggling,
Mhm.
that are like, well, maybe I should give in to Rome. It's like,
Mhm.
no.
Yeah.
Look, and this is the key. The centerpiece of Revelation 10, 12, 18, 19, 20 is that Jesus comes as the victor,
Mhm.
and he's a lamb.
Yeah.
And he comes with his own blood upon him.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like he won by sacrificing himself. He won by dying. And so it's the encouragement to the martyrs. And martyr in Greek means like witness. And those witnesses got killed. So it's like, no, you win by being killed. So they have no power over you. And it's essentially equalizing, or not so much equalizing, it's putting us on a higher ground of saying, if they kill you, you've won.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where we're supposed to, okay, we don't have to imagine. Now we go to Chick-fil-A, we're sitting down with our book of Revelation and it'll be like, and there's blood and there's pestilence and disease. And you're like, oh, I don't want any of this.
Yeah.
But these people lived in blood and pestilence and disease. And it's like, even if you go through that, you've won.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it's hope.
If
Yeah.
you're already fearing for your life.
Yeah.
Now knowing that, like Philippians 1:21, to live is Christ, to die is gain.
Yeah.
It's a different way to think about it.
Yeah.
We don't really want to think about death at all.
Yeah.
But then when we realize the setting that they would have been in, it would have been like,
Yeah.
wow, there's even hope.
Yeah.
Even hope in death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not so much, it shouldn't bring you anxiety. It should bring you out of anxiety.
Yeah.
That there's an equalizer. Like someone comes along and says, I see you,
Mhm.
I see what has happened, and I'm going to make it all right.
Yeah.